The Silent Empire. How a 400-year-old Dutch company built modern capitalism. What if I told you there's a company that was worth more than Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Saudi Aramco combined? And what if I told you this company is over 400 years old? You heard that right. We're not talking about some modern tech giant. We're talking about a Dutch trading company that literally invented the stock market, created the first corporation, and launched the world's first IPO. And here's the crazy part. The family behind it still holds power today. This is the story nobody talks about when they mention the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers. This is the story of how a small group of Dutch merchants and one royal family created the blueprint for every corporation, every stock exchange, and every financial system we use right now. So buckle up, because today we're diving into the Dutch East India Company and the House of Orange. And trust me, this gets wild. Let's go back to 1580. Something massive just happened in Europe. Spain just took over Portugal. These two superpowers merged under one king. Think about that for a second. Spain and Portugal together controlled huge chunks of Asia, Africa, and the Americas. They had armies, navies, gold mines, spice routes, everything. And there's one small country looking at this merger, absolutely terrified: the Netherlands. Here's the problem. The Dutch were technically part of Spain at this time, but they were fighting for their independence. They were rebels. And now, suddenly, their enemy just became twice as powerful. Spain and Portugal together? That's like facing a final boss that just absorbed all the other bosses. The Dutch knew they couldn't win a traditional war. They didn't have enough soldiers, they didn't have enough guns, they didn't have massive gold reserves. So they did something completely revolutionary. They built a different kind of weapon, not made of steel or gunpowder, made of capital. The birth of a monster. In 1602, 7 private trading companies in the Netherlands merged together. They formed one massive company called the VOC, or as we know it today, the Dutch East India Company. Now, on the surface, this looks like just another merchant business, right? Ships going back and forth, trading spices and silk, nothing special. Wrong. This company had armed warships. It had private armies. It had forts scattered across Asia. It could sign treaties with foreign kings. It could declare war. It could capture entire territories and govern them like a country. But here's the most radical part, the part that changed everything. For the first time in human history, ordinary citizens could buy shares in this company. Regular people could invest their money and get a piece of the profits. The company could raise massive amounts of capital without taxing anyone, without needing a king's treasury. This wasn't wealth tied to land or noble titles anymore. This was wealth manufactured through markets, and it could scale infinitely. The merchants were running the show. They were the ones making deals, commanding ships, and expanding trade routes. But someone else was quietly backing this whole operation. Someone with a famous name, but no real power. Not yet, anyway. The House of Orange. Now you might be wondering, who exactly is the House of Orange? No, I'm not talking about the fruit company. I'm talking about one of Europe's most important royal families. But here's the thing, they didn't actually rule anything. Not really. They had a fancy title. They were called stadholders, which was basically like being a high-ranking official. But they had no kingdom, no throne, no crown. The Dutch Republic was run by merchants, not royalty. Amsterdam's elite didn't want kings telling them what to do. And Spain? Spain wanted the House of Orange completely destroyed. So this family was stuck, squeezed from both sides. They couldn't rely on feudal land or inherited gold like other royal families. The old rules didn't apply anymore. They had to adapt or disappear. So they made a choice that would change their family forever. They bet everything on capital, on markets, on this new weapon called the Dutch East India Company. The House of Orange didn't run the VOC directly, but they helped fund it. They backed it. They tied their entire future to its success. And decades later, that connection became official. Two stadholders, William IV and William V, both from the House of Orange, served as presidents of both the VOC and the West India Company. Suddenly, without ever wearing a crown, they became some of the most powerful men in Europe. Not because of divine right or military conquest, because of dividends. The VOC carried the Dutch flag across the world. But it also carried the ambitions of one family building an empire in total silence. The scale of power. Let me give you some numbers that'll blow your mind. At its peak, the Dutch East India Company was worth $7.9 trillion in today's money. Read that again, $7.9 trillion. The most valuable company in the world right now is Nvidia, worth about half that. Imagine a company twice as valuable as Nvidia, but existing 400 years ago. That's the VOC. From the early 1600s to the mid-1700s, over 1 million people left the Netherlands and sailed to Asia. 1 million. They weren't explorers chasing adventure. They were employees, workers for a megacorporation. The VOC recruited sailors, soldiers, clerks, craftsmen, everyone. These people ran ports in Ceylon, Java, and Bengal. They guarded warehouses. They negotiated with kings. And sometimes they enforced Dutch interests at gunpoint. Behind every profit was a massive human engine. 1 million lives crossing oceans to serve the world's most powerful company. But none of this happened by accident. The VOC's success stood on 3 pillars: a powerful government charter, Amsterdam's financial elite, and the strategic backing of the House of Orange. That charter wasn't just a business license. It was basically a royal mandate. The VOC had full control over Dutch trade in Asia. But it didn't stop there. The company could sign international treaties. It could raise armies. It could capture land and govern entire colonies. Every move carried the weight of a nation, even though it came from a company boardroom. The VOC operated 150 merchant ships, employed 50,000 people, and commanded a private army of 10,000 soldiers. It didn't act like a business. It moved like a sovereign state. And nowhere was its dominance more obvious than in the East Indies. The Conquest. In 1610, the VOC got permission to build a trading post near the Siliwangi River in Indonesia. By 1619, they'd captured the entire city. They renamed it Batavia, after the ancient name for the Netherlands. This wasn't just a name change. Batavia became the center of Dutch power in Asia. It's why you still see massive Dutch influence in Indonesia today. The food, the language, the architecture, it's all still there. Dutch governors ruled from Batavia for 300 years. Every surrounding kingdom had to answer to Dutch interests. But running an operation this massive required serious money. Not just from kings or short-term loans. They needed something sustainable, something revolutionary. That's when the real innovation happened. The financial revolution. In August 1602, the Dutch East India Company did something that had never been done before. They opened their doors to the public. For the first time in human history, a company sold shares to ordinary people. This was the world's first initial public offering, the first IPO ever. And the money flooded in. But this raised a huge question. How did competing powerful families put aside their differences and work together? The answer leads back to the House of Orange. You see, they didn't just back this transformation, they depended on it. At home, Amsterdam's merchant class was pushing for more control. The House of Orange had royal ambitions, but no throne. And abroad, Spain still considered Dutch independence a crime punishable by death. Feudalism offered no solution. The House of Orange had no serfs, no silver mines, no divine right. So they created an entirely new power base. Not through land or precious metals, through financial institutions that made risk predictable. At the core were permanent shares. For the first time, ownership in a global company could be transferred freely. This gave birth to the world's first stock exchange, the Amsterdam Stock Exchange. And traders didn't stop there. They started betting on what shares would be worth tomorrow. They created speculation, arbitrage, hedging. All the tools Wall Street uses today were invented right here. VOC shares started at an index value of 100 in 1602. By the 1720s, they'd risen to about 1,000, a 10-fold increase. One of history's first massive cases of FOMO. But building a global empire on public money came with risk. What if ships sank? What if trade routes collapsed? The Dutch answered that fear with another legal breakthrough. They invented limited liability. If a ship sank or a trade failed, investors only lost what they put in. Their homes, their other assets, their families stayed safe. Suddenly, people were much more confident investing. This is a concept we still use today to separate personal assets from business liabilities. The VOC also printed actual share certificates, stamped, signed, and exchanged freely. For the first time, ownership could flow from hand to hand, city to city, without needing royal permission or family inheritance. This was revolutionary.
And Dutch financial influence didn't stay in the Netherlands for long. The empire spreads. In 1688, England had a problem. King James II had lost the trust of Parliament and the people. The country was on edge. British leaders needed someone Protestant with a claim to the throne. They turned to James's daughter, Mary. And Mary was married to William of Orange. William sailed to England with troops and a mindset shaped by the Dutch Republic. He saw markets not as distractions from power, but as tools to sustain it. This became known as the Glorious Revolution. William and Mary took the English throne together. But this wasn't just a political change, it was a financial revolution. During William's reign, England launched the Bank of England. It created public credit. It introduced government bonds. It funded wars through capital markets. These were Dutch innovations, now written into British law. But the story goes even further back. In 1609, a Dutch ship called the Halve Maan reached a harbor we now call New York City. In 1624, the Dutch West India Company founded New Amsterdam at the southern tip of Manhattan. At first glance, it looked like just a trading post. But its layout told a different story. Organized streets, strong trade networks, diverse communities. The Dutch were building something rare, a commercial hub that would become the financial center of the New World. Amsterdam's influence was everywhere, in how credit flowed, how contracts were honored, how global trade linked this small settlement to markets abroad. In 1664, the British took over and renamed it New York. But they didn't erase the Dutch systems. They kept them. The legal structures, the financial habits, the commercial customs, because they worked. The financial DNA. Meanwhile, back in Europe, something interesting was happening. Amsterdam and London started working together. Amsterdam favored banks and public credit. London leaned into speculation and fast markets. By the 1700s, the two cities' financial elites were cooperating closely. Dutch reliability met British innovation. And this blend didn't stay in Europe. Because of shared colonial ties, especially through New Amsterdam, these financial ideas traveled west. New York inherited legal structures, credit customs, and institutional habits from both Amsterdam and London. That shared DNA quietly laid the groundwork. Over time, New York absorbed the tools that made Europe's financial centers thrive. And eventually, it built its own version. This blend fueled empires and laid the foundation for international finance as we know it today. You can see Dutch financial influence everywhere, from the New York Stock Exchange to the halls of Parliament, from corporate law to banking systems. Long after the VOC's final voyage, its methods continued echoing in boardrooms and stock markets worldwide. The fall. But even giants have limits. By the late 1700s, cracks started showing. The company that once ruled the seas began sinking under its own weight. Power had scaled fast, but oversight didn't keep up. Corruption crept in. Internal divisions deepened. Military costs rose. Competition from Britain and France intensified. At first, the VOC survived, but slowly the grip loosened. Decision-making turned sluggish. Officials focused more on their own pockets than the company's future. Global markets shifted. They became less tolerant of monopolies. Faster, more flexible rivals emerged. By 1795, the VOC was no longer all-powerful. The Dutch government stepped in, nationalized the company, and took control. The company had lasted nearly 2 centuries. Founded in 1602 with a 21-year trade monopoly in Asia, winding down in 1796 when the government took over. The mighty charter had quietly expired. But the empire didn't vanish. Its architecture of power lived on. The legacy today. Today, the Netherlands isn't a seafaring empire anymore. It's a financial empire. Its influence is felt in boardrooms, treaties, and offshore accounts. The numbers speak for themselves. The Netherlands ranks among the most competitive economies on Earth. It's a magnet for global capital from every continent. It ranks incredibly high in foreign direct investment. Over $4.3 trillion flowing in, over $5.2 trillion flowing out. Dutch holdings abroad now exceed $3.5 trillion. An astonishing footprint for a country with fewer people than California. And behind this enormous network of capital, one family still casts a long shadow. The House of Orange-Nassau. They still reign. The crown may be ceremonial, but their connections are anything but symbolic. From defense to energy to corporate governance, the royal family remains deeply tied to Dutch industry. They quietly hold stakes in companies like Shell. They maintain wealth through trusts and investment vehicles. In 1907, a new titan emerged. Royal Dutch merged with Shell Transport and Trading Company to form Royal Dutch Shell. Once again, a Dutch company would dominate a global industry. And once again, it carried a royal title. Shell wasn't alone. ING Group,
One of Europe's most powerful financial institutions, also traces its roots to the Netherlands. The merchants and businessmen tied to the VOC have descendants holding stakes in modern corporate giants today. Some sit quietly on boards. Others shape policy through foundations and capital networks. Their surnames rarely make headlines, but their blueprints are everywhere, from oil to banking to logistics. When we think of capitalism, we think of names like Rothschild, Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan. But those figures didn't invent the model, they followed it. Long before them, there was the House of Orange, and they built the capitalist blueprint. The dark side. Now, this video has focused a lot on financial innovations, but we need to talk about the other side. The atrocities committed during the VOC's expansion in Asia. Massacres, violence against indigenous populations, exploitation of resources and people. Let me give you a few examples. The Banda Islands Massacre. The VOC nearly exterminated the indigenous population. Thousands were killed. Survivors were enslaved. The company replaced locals with Dutch settlers. The Amboina Massacre. The VOC executed English and Japanese traders on accusations of plotting against Dutch interests. The Batavia Massacre. Thousands of Chinese civilians killed in what we know today as Jakarta. These are just a few examples. The VOC also used forced labor extensively. Indigenous populations were compelled to cultivate crops for the company's benefit. It led to widespread suffering in local communities. They frequently used violence to suppress resistance and maintain control over trade routes. This included military actions against indigenous populations and suppression of local political structures. So yes, they contributed massively to modern finance, but it's crucial to keep things in perspective. The final question. From the rise of the VOC to the reign of Royal Dutch Shell, we can see a clear pattern. Power and capital are inseparable. The House of Orange realized early that capital could be more potent than crowns. They transformed trade into a corporate state hybrid. They scaled that model across centuries and continents. They left a legacy that defines how the world governs money today. The Netherlands may no longer rule the seas,
But Dutch capital now moves across borders with more influence than fleets ever could. So that brings us to a question that still matters today. If markets now hold the power once reserved for monarchs, then who governs the markets? Who holds the crown when the crown is invisible? If you watched this far, drop an orange emoji in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, please subscribe. I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers and could really use your help. Also, if you're into these kinds of stories, check out my videos. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.